All right, well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. And, probably be brief. We've got some other things to do before session starts today. We want to take a few minutes to get with you. And it looks like it's going to be about $48.7 billion operating budget for fiscal year 2027. It's a budget that, balances and starts to take a critical look at making sure Missouri state government's living within its means, just like Missouri citizens have to do around the kitchen table. They're balancing their checkbook every day, and they expect the same out of their state government. So there's some tough decisions having to be made in this budget. There's no question about that. But it's a budget that prioritizes education, public education, higher education, same level of funding as the previous year. When you see in some other programs and places us having to make some cuts. And so I think it's good that we're prioritizing public education and workforce development. When you look about the same level of funding in our colleges as well, I think it's unfortunate we weren't able to come to any sort of compromise or agreement on changing the antiquated and absurd way in which we fund higher education in the state of Missouri. We did, however, importantly, include language instructing the Department of Higher Education Workforce Development to develop a formula of their own that is objective, that uses the same amount of funding that we used, and they'll have to report that back by the end of the year for consideration for the governor and the House and Senate in their development of their future budgets, and hope there'll be value and fruit to that process because I believe it's already well past time that something changes there in that regard. Would have liked to see a little more progress this year, but what is occurring is, it is inevitable. It is unsustainable, and it will change. There's no question about that. It's just a matter of when, not if. We also prioritize public safety, public education too. Public safety, very importantly, adding some new positions to the State Highway Patrol. Hasn't gotten a lot of attention this budget year, but continue to emphasize Governor Kehoe's push for public safety around the state. And we've seen that as well in House Bill 8, and new positions for the Missouri State Highway Patrol for some of their drug and crime control activities and help us with crime and other issues all across the state. So that's important as well. When you look at the foundational responsibility of state government, I think education and public safety are right there at the top. So again, I believe it's a good thing this budget emphasizes those things as well. So there's a lot obviously in this budget. When you're talking about $48.7 million, so I could continue to talk about any number of things. I won't do that. I'll see if you have any questions. I appreciate 3 of my subcommittee chairs and my vice chair being with me here and for their support and work, and all the members of the Budget Committee in the House through the process as we're nearing the end. So, any questions?
Can you walk us through the education budget as it pertains to the use of lottery funds to backfill? It seems like there's some Senate issues with how that was handled.
Well, so the House position was the GovRec on foundation formula, dollars and the fund mix, which includes lottery and schools money and some other gaming funds, always has since we've had those funds. So the House recommendation and the Senate recommendation of dollars were the same and the fund mix was the same. The Senate put $118 million in lieu of lottery in the foundation formula out of the Capital Commission. And in conference, of course, the governor's made public and private comments that he doesn't want to see Capital Commission money set aside for the state capitol to be spent on one-time things, on other things, not the state capitol. And so, but I think as the days have gone on, negotiations and private conversations with the governor, I think he at least indicated that he would consider some amount, understand that everybody has their own priorities and what they're trying to do. And so, I hesitate to even, I certainly don't speak for the governor, and I wasn't in many of these conversations, but I understand that maybe there's a sense that he would be open to looking at something. But keep in mind, the Senate and their total budget, they didn't just use it in House Bill 2. They used $220 million Capital Commission funds in the operating budget. I think it's abundantly clear, and nobody questions that's been working on this, that is too much. The governor is not comfortable with that. So it had to be less. So like part of the negotiations became bringing that down. Of course, the House position was to use no capital commission funding in the operating budget in House Bill 2 or anywhere else. And so what we did, and if you go look at the markup sheet, I don't know if the Senate puts it on their website. It's compiled by both staffs, House and Senate. It's on the House website, has been for days. It's what we go through in committee. But you can look. We put $45 million back from the blind pension. That was a House position that we put in. I say that, I guess let me make a correction. We were different from the governor in part of the fund mix. The total dollars were the same, but we used about $64 million of blind pension in lieu of general revenue. The Senate reversed that position. In conference and on the sheet, it's $64 million blind pension GR fund swap. The position, and that was Senator Black's bill to lead, that was taken was $45 million out of blind pension. On the paper it says swap GR. All right, the next position is the Capital Commission. It was $118 million Senate position. The House position was zero. Senator Black said $73 million and change. And that was the position. And then below that are the lottery and school monies funds that the Senate reduced because they used Capital Commission in lieu of those funds. It's a complicated question you ask. And so those necessarily were compromised to get to the middle because you need to make up the 73 to 118 in the lottery and others to get to the total dollars. So in the end of the day, and always, in the House budget, the Senate budget, and the Conference Committee report, the total dollars always the same, right? It's only been the fund mix. So I have heard, I guess like you, that maybe some thought something else was happening, and this has been somewhat of a mystery to me, and I guess I can understand, and I'm beginning to understand more all the time how, and I do see, it can be technical and complicated, how maybe somebody thought something else was occurring. But what I mentioned to you is the Conference Committee report as signed and as compiled by both staffs as they work on it together from the Conference Committee. Does that answer your question?
I mean, is the lottery going to be short, basically? You're basing that on projected growth, or that may or may not happen?
It's not projected growth. It's based on the target that it hit 2 years ago, I think, which is the high water mark. And for whatever reason, I'm sure there's all kinds of armchair quarterbacking. The last 2 years, the lottery came in somewhat less than what it did the 2 or 3 years ago, whenever that high water mark of $400 million in proceeds was. So is House Bill 2 based on projections of lottery? Yes, just like the whole state budget is. Every general revenue item. I hate to tell you, we don't have $15 billion of general revenue in the Treasury. The whole thing's based on projections of money that's yet to hit the Treasury. Lottery, general revenue, corporate income tax, whatever it is. That's all we do here, is base things on projections. So you're asking me to predict the future. We do the best we can. Sometimes we do better than others.
The general revenue deficit in this budget, made up from fund balances, is in excess of $2 billion, close to $2.3 billion. Are you kicking the can down the road? What's your advice for the next General Assembly on how to close that gap?
Well, we are, we made significant cuts this year to core items. So I think it is a process. And there is still money in the Treasury. You know, people talk about deficit spending. It's not the same as in Washington, D.C. There's no printing of money here. There's no borrowing to, make things work out. And so we might be drawing down from a reserve, but once and if that is exhausted, then, this thing will work out because you can't spend money you don't have. So we are spending something from the reserve this year. Yes, that's been true for the past several years as we've made capital investments, one-time investments with this one-time money we've had. You're right. There's going to be some difficult decisions for future General Assemblies as they balance state spending with state revenue, and I think that's what we've tried to do here responsibly. And we are drawing some things back or winding some things down appropriately to try to help with that. But there is more work to be done in that regard, and that's that's why we budget annually and go through this process, and it's based on revenues, and we see where we're at, use the best information we have. And so, I'm comfortable. I think this is a fiscally responsible budget for fiscal year 2027, but fiscal year 2028, 2029, as you go forth, those are going to have to be looked at individually, and they might have to make different decisions in that General Assembly.
What would you recommend, where would you recommend they look for savings if next year the demands on general revenue are 15 billion plus and revenue might be 13 and a half?
A budget's a list of priorities, so I'm not going to speculate on what revenue is going to be, and the next General Assembly, which hasn't even been elected yet, is going to have to speak into that and determine what their priorities are. And I've told you what ours are this year. It's education, K-12, higher education, workforce development. Most specifically, I think our members really care about, and public safety. There's other priorities in the state budget, no doubt, but that's, again, what Missouri families have to do, prioritize, and sometimes you got to look at wants and needs and all those things, and you've got to make it balance, and that's the task before us here, and that'll be the task for the next General Assembly.
What's the total hit on the Capital Commission coming out of, how much are you taking out of that original?
I think it's,
And the follow-up question would be, what do you see the future of that project?
it's 121.5 million in the operating. There's 15 million in House Bill 19 for the garage, and then there's 110.4 million that was a governor's amendment that we included for the Capitol proper. So, do the quick math on that. And I think we started with 590. So there's a significant amount remaining. I share what I understand to be the governor's sentiment, which is maybe not where I started 8 years ago as somebody that, there's few people that live further from the state capitol than I do. But I do think those statesmen and women that sacrificed and 100 years ago made the decision to do what we have here before us, many of them probably not living to see it or enjoy it or serve in this beautiful chamber or work in this state capitol. They did a good thing for the state in the state capitol. I think anybody that's been here can agree, and it does need some attention after 100 years. And so I'm hopeful that, and I don't know what the amount is, what's totally necessary or appropriate to make sure this building is here for Missourians 100 years from now, but I do hope whatever that is, that future General Assemblies continue to prioritize that to make sure that Missourian state capitol remains to be what it has been for all Missourians.
How is not fully funding the foundation formula prioritizing education?
Well, you have to keep in mind we added more money to the formula last year than any other line, certainly in general revenue funding, $500 million, $500 million. We're talking about more than $4 billion in total for public education, more money than we've ever spent, from any other period if you look back. The current formula that's in statute has automatic escalators in it, which have been very aggressive in recent years. It's $190 million this year. It was $500 million last year. So you're talking, just in the period of 2 years on that. And there's other pieces of education funding, like the transportation line and other K-12 education obligations, even outside of the formula. But just on that formula piece, you're talking about an increase of $750 million in 2 years. When general revenue income, as we've heard about, is 12, 13, 14 billion dollars. So and again, that's just the increase. That's not what we've been spending. That's the requested increase. And we did put, again, $500 million in last year, fully funded the transportation line that goes up every year because transportation costs necessarily, seemingly go up. And so, I would challenge anyone to look at anything else in the state budget and tell me where we've done more, where we have prioritized more. So it's all, in comparison relative to anything else, I don't think you can take any other conclusion that it is as great a priority of this General Assembly as anything is public education.
Are you concerned this could set a precedent, though, of keeping these funds stagnant because of the increases that happened in recent years, that then they don't go up in near future years?
No, I mean, this is in that way not a new precedent. I think the formula was last not fully funded in 2020 because there were withholds during COVID. And then it was a few years before that, and the many years prior to that, the formula had not been funded. And that was even a different formula, I believe, in statute. The formula has changed a couple of times in some way or manner since those days. So this isn't a new conversation. It's been a challenge before. But again, there's education funding outside of the foundation formula. I mentioned the transportation line. I think it was 2 years ago, we increased the transportation line by, I think it was near 300%, because we were funding about 30% on the dollar of expenses, and we went to the statutory maximum of 75 cents on the dollar. Again, that was just 2 years ago. Again, I would quibble with anyone that says we haven't prioritized public education, especially when you look, and I think you have to, in comparison to everything else we're doing, because we've certainly given as great a priority as everything else. I think we're going to have to go now to get ready for the session on the floor, but last question. This side of the room, you've been so quiet, so.
There was a lot of talk about the language during conference committee and why you chose to include some of the language in those bills instead of in statutes. Can you walk us through what specifically with movers, with the higher education formula mandate, why was going through the budget bills the better choice than the statutory?
Well, when you talk about movers, this is the state's IT kind of accounting system, ERP, human resources. There's a lot that's going to be a part of that. We've had tremendous problems. Movers doesn't happen without money. And an appropriation by law under the Constitution has to have two things, a purpose and a dollar amount. I think to hear so many people tell it, they'd think you ought to just crack open a budget bill and just see dollars. And, I don't know how you make heads or tails of that. So necessarily there's got to be words in a budget bill. And budget bills are laws too. They just expire after 1 year. And so that purpose statement is necessarily very important. And sometimes we do put more of a proviso on certain things than others, as, money shall be spent in this way, or money shall not be spent unless this and this. Totally appropriate. It's done all the time. We might have seen a little bit more of that this year, frankly, from our friends on the Senate side. It usually oftentimes seems to be the House that's working more on the language, so they have really made a tremendous effort in that regard this year and worked on a number of things on their end, especially relating to IT projects. But again, on higher education, the funding comes from House Bill 3. More than $1 billion going to our public institutions of higher education. And so when it comes to the funding and how they're funded and how the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development is funded, I think it's appropriate that we instruct them as to how we want that funding to be constructed and what we want them to be looking at as it relates to future funding. So nothing really new there in that regard, I would say. Thank you.